Hi, this is Mary James with Passive House Accelerator. Thank you for tuning in to this special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast, recorded live at the Passive House Canada Conference in Victoria, British Columbia. And I'm sitting here with Craig Edwards from the City of Vancouver, who just gave a very inspiring talk on the performance outcomes of it was covering the performance outcomes of the buildings that have already been built to the Passive House standard that are owned by the City of Vancouver. And there were a variety of building types there that you talked about. So can you just tell us a little about the building types?
So yes, my name's Craig Edwards, and I'm the manager of energy and utilities in the facilities portion of the city. So the city owns and operates about 600 buildings like community centers and libraries and fire halls and theaters and things like that. So my role is to focus on reducing energy and greenhouse gas emissions and improve the sustainability of the city-owned building stock. So we have a really progressive council in the City of Vancouver, and we're a charter city, so we can develop our own building bylaw or our own building code, and so we've been trying to be leaders in staying ahead of the province and the federal government in terms of showing leadership in terms of requiring high energy performance for new buildings. So we've, as part of that leadership, we've adopted a policy saying that we would build all our city-owned buildings to a passive house standard and use no fossil fuels in them. And that policy has been around since 2018. So we've got about 12 buildings now that have been designed and to a passive house standard, and 4 of them have been completed, and we have operational data on them, and there's another 3 or 4 that are under construction. And so those buildings include 3 fire halls, 3 child cares, an operational works yard building, 1 community center, 7-story artist studio and art gallery building, and so all sorts of different building types.
And not the easiest building types in which to get really low energy performance and greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, that's true.
And so really at the end of your presentation, you showed a very striking graph that showed the energy performance of, probably 40 buildings that the City of Vancouver owns. And there were 4 of the completed passive house buildings in the graph, and guess where they were?
Right at the very bottom in terms of energy use per square meters. We track and benchmark the performance of all of our big buildings, and we've got a report where we regularly report on about 110 of the biggest buildings. So I put a chart together with comparing the performance of all those existing buildings, including all the LEED Gold and LEED Platinum buildings that we've built over the last 30 years. And then compared the performance of the passive house projects to the larger portfolio, and they're at the absolute bottom. The graph bars are so small at the bottom, showing the performance of the passive house projects compared to the broader portfolio, that it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's very striking. And in addition to the energy benefits, you also talked about comfort benefits from the occupants of these buildings. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the example that I talked about in the presentation was the Fire Hall 17 project, which was built and it's been operating for 2 or 3 years now, and it was a project replacing an existing fire hall that was located on Knight Street in Vancouver, which is a really busy truck route. And the old building was made out of a cinder block, and firefighters found it very uncomfortable because the building shook when the trucks went by and didn't have any air conditioning. It was really noisy, and firefighters didn't want to work there, sleep in the dormitories. And so now when we go visit the fire hall and see the firefighters, they just rave about how quiet the building is and comfortable, thermally comfortable. It's cool, and it's got a stable temperature in the summer and the winter. And when they come back from fighting fires, they appreciate that they can cool down, which they can't do in some of the older fire halls with no air conditioning. And so they just rave about how comfortable it is, and talk to us about how important it is to adopt the Passive House standard for other future fire hall projects that we're working on.
Which you are, right?
Yeah, so we've got, that one's complete, and we've got 2 others under design right now. The next one to start construction is Fire Hall 9, which will be a regular fire hall with 2-story fire hall, and then 2 stories of office buildings on top, containing all the offices for the Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services in Vancouver. And that's about to start construction. And then we have another one called Fire Hall 8, where we're replacing an existing fire hall as well. And it's going to be a fire hall combined with a tower with affordable housing, as well as a city-owned childcare. And we're building the fire hall to a Passive House standard. The tower and childcare are being built to not being certified to the Passive House standard. It's still being designed to a very high energy efficient standard. So anyways, we've got 3 fire hall projects, and then there will be more in the future, as the plan is to replace more fire halls that are at the end of their life.
And lots of firefighters clamoring to be at the Passive House buildings.
Yes.
And you've also, one of the other building types you mentioned was childcare, which is a particular, to my mind, population that also, where comfort is important. And you talked about interesting story about how the heating was out at one of the childcare facilities during the winter. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I told the story about how one of our staff members had a child in non-Passive House childcare that's across the street from the City Hall building. And one winter, the power for the heating system went out, and so they had to shut down the childcare, and he was called, and he had to take the day off work and pick up his child and go home because it got too cold instantly in the childcare. And then we can compare that to one of the Passive House childcares that's been running for a few years. Just this winter, the heat pump system, the water in the heat pump system froze because it had some maintenance done on it, and the contractor had removed the glycol in the system and didn't put it back. So it was just regular water. It froze, and it was about -13 for about a week in January, or there were temperatures that dipped down to -13, and we didn't even hear any complaints from the childcare. They kept operating. The temperature did go down to about 17 degrees Celsius, but they kept operating. And so, I think that shows you how resilient a Passive House building is for disruption in heating.
Great. Well, really great to hear about these success stories. And has it helped the City of Vancouver stay with this as their goal for future buildings?
Yeah. So the City of Vancouver has its own building code called the Vancouver Building Bylaw, and the plan is to keep chipping away and making it more aggressive to get to a zero emissions target by, now it's 2025. And yes, us adapting the Passive House standard has definitely helped, because it's caused market transformation with the design and construction community learning how to build to a higher performance standard, and it transformed the supplier and distribution systems with new local Passive House products available. So that enables. That lets the city keep on, boosting up the performance requirements in the code as the industry progresses. So, yes, I think it's been hugely beneficial.
Well, it's really been great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out.